And we are back. Thank you for joining us for this InfoWars Nightly News special report. This is part 2 of our interview in studio with a major food industry insider. Over 30 years, the trailblazer, the granddaddy of the storable foods movement. He has been absolutely on target with his breakdown and predictions because he's in the inside. He's ordering food a year out on contracts that hasn't even grown yet. And now food prices are exploding all over the world. Here, it's a serious pain in the butt, and some people go hungry, but overseas, it's a death sentence. Now, we talked about Global Food Crisis Special Report last week in part 1, and I had a lot to add, of course, in the 45-minute interview, so there are a few points Steve didn't get to. I want him to kind of recap and hit a few points that he wanted to finish, and then what I found really interesting in a private meeting we had yesterday before taping this, where he was really laying it out to me, and I said, you ought to say this on air. You ought to stay in town for another day and talk about this. So here he is. Secrets of the food industry, from the government angle, but also all these big companies and others rushing into storable foods, as people understand. 50 million on food stamps, half the public and government assistance of some type, food shortages, the Chinese coming in and buying our food, buying all the African food. This is a perfect storm. We're hoping for the best. We're preparing for the worst. And it looks like the worst is what we're getting with QE3 and more. So, Steve, right before we started taping again here, you were really laying some heavy stuff on me. So before we even get to recapping global food crisis and then get to the new info, you looked at me and you said, what would be the greatest cash crop if you were ruthless? And I figured it out in about 30 seconds with you sitting there looking at me. But of course, I've said this myself in other ways, but it's true. And so let's try to recreate that now. We're sitting here, just taped the last 45 minutes, taking a break. I mean, say it again, recreate that moment.
Well, what if you were a farmer and you were looking for the ideal cash crop or cash, investment? What if you found something, a critter that would pay to be born and would provide its own shelter, would provide its own food, provide a living, and pay you for the privilege of doing that. And then if it got sick, it would pay you to keep it alive while you went through several means of treatment. And
while they tested things on you that they kept for themselves, it worked.
Every 10 years, they change one new drug, for another one, because the second one is going to offset the side effects of the first one, and they can keep you alive for a lot longer time. And then you kept that critter along, and then it pays for the final hospitalization, and then it pays to die.
And be planted.
And it pays to be buried. Now that would be an ideal cash crop.
And so you'd want to put fluoride in the water and other things, so you'd make them sick earlier so you could get more of what they produce, so they would never get enough wealth to become your competitor. You wouldn't want people to do well either. You wouldn't want too much prosperity. In the old model, we weren't really being so much farmed. It was more of a prosperity system. But now we are being farmed. And the feudal farmers that are farming us, they don't want us to have prosperity. And they've taken the richest country in history, and in just 50 years of globalism, turned us into the greatest debtors who have to ship in 40% of our food.
Well, the interesting thing about it, I had thought at one time of writing a little pamphlet, Dictatorship for Idiots.
Ooh, that'd be good.
Okay, and here's what I do. I would tell the totalitarian governments, I would tell the wannabe dictators that they're going exactly the wrong direction. You see, the New World Order and all these idiots that want to control people are really stupid. Do you know how they could be wealthy and prosperous beyond their fondest dreams? Is if they took some of these third world countries, these little wannabe dictators, and they run around buying their wives all sorts of shoes while everybody else is starving. If they would take every person in that country and find a means by which they could use their talents and their abilities and make them so prosperous. And they wouldn't tax the money away from them, but they would make their economy so prosperous that every single soul, there were no poor among them. They would be wealthy beyond their possible imagination.
And the Federal Reserve admits, they call that overheating in the economy, they work constantly to suppress us, constantly to ship the jobs, constantly to write tax codes where you've got to leave. They're doing everything they can to try to shut our economy down. It's called Agenda 21.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is you got to say to yourself, how stupid are these people? They consider themselves the elite.
Well, they're sadists, so they'd rather make us poor and poisoned and ugly so they can feel good about themselves. They're evil. Steve, look, they're not like our founders, who weren't perfect, but compared to these people, they were like gods. I mean, they understood, hey, they had such good opinions of themselves, they're like, I'll just empower other people as well. People say, oh, well, some of them had slaves and stuff. It was their ideas that ended all that. That was in the time they were in. It's those ideas that have trailblazed everything.
The masters, the great masters of all times, Christ, Buddha, all of these guys, the ones that you don't even hear about, they're so advanced. They are never judgmental, and they are always seeking to uplift and improve mankind. And so the fascinating thing that you have is we have people who are intelligent, and in terms of learning, one of the things that I deal with constantly, and I'm just about, my book is going to be out in October, so I
want to have you on about that.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. But anyway, the fascinating thing is people learn in different ways. A true master can learn by reading about and studying other people's experiences. A wise man can learn by just observing what other people do. But most of us just have to pee on the electric fence.
Experience.
Yep, the hard way. But the fascinating thing about what we're doing here is we're trying to help people learn. You see, I should be retired right now. I don't need to run this company that I'm running. You don't need to make the money that you're making other than to keep funding what you're doing in terms of educating and helping people.
Listen, 6 years ago, we talked in. I had like 5, 6 employees. I wanted to stay small, but I realized I'm already reaching so many people. I have a responsibility. It's torture to run 50 people. It's torture to try to get it all right. It's torture. Well, you know what I dream of? Getting out of here. I dream of the New World Order being defeated and literally going and working on my family farm and ranch. You're absolutely right. That's why I admire George Washington. You know, the King of England, they were offering him the kingship, and George Washington, after 2 terms, he just said, I'm going to my farm. And that's what people don't get is that, I mean, you're absolutely right, though. And you're going all over the country educating people that you better be self-sufficient. And it does start with food, and that's how you finance your overall message. But we're doing the same thing here. You know, the globalists want you dependent. We don't want you dependent. We want you empowered, and it's the difference. And that's why the globalists are not the elite, because if they were elite, they would know they want to empower humanity, and they say they want to empower humanity, but everything they do in their own real manuals, it's about putting humanity down. And I say they're the scum of the earth for it. Give us now, as an icon in your industry, known for over 30 years, all these people, you know, claim they were the first, this, that. I went and looked it up. You're the trailblazer. You've got the biggest company, the best company, the whole 9 yards, efoodsdirect.com. You've got the floor. Lay out the secrets. Because, I mean, I begged you. You said, I don't want to go out and say bad things about people. Notice your advertisement doesn't do that. All the others sit there and say they're the best, everybody else is scum. Notice you're the one not saying that. But people deserve to know the truth. And there are some other good companies out there. But the point is, a lot of it is fly-by-night. You've been around over 30 years. Break it down for us, Steve Shank.
Well, the way I'm going to do that is the way I consider morally to do it. I'm not going to tell you what they do or don't do. I'm going to tell you what we do, and you can draw your own conclusions. Okay, here's the deal. I was in the dehydrated food business, shipping out storable food. Dehydrated food, typically when you got a can of carrots, they're just dried up old carrots, and you put them together with 7 or 8 other cans, you can make a meal. Just getting people prepared so that when the stuff hit the fan, they had food. The same principle that we're working with right now. But it became impossible for people really in our day and age to be able to use the food, so they had to just store it back and never use it, and it didn't taste all that great. So we decided that we were going to put out some food that they could, that was totally complete in and of itself, that they didn't have to do anything to, that they just boil some water and put some food in, and it had to be good food. Couldn't find anybody that makes it. No one makes it. All of the food storage companies out there buy from other suppliers that just have the recipes, and they buy it and put it in their can, put their label on it, and that's it. Couldn't find anything that we would eat ourselves or feed our grandkids. So we started making our own. Didn't want to. We're just a marketing company. So we started making our own food. Well, it was almost impossible to find food that didn't have added MSG, didn't have hydrogenated oil that'll make you glow in the dark, walk sideways, and one eye travel to the other side of your head. Didn't have genetically modified stuff that hasn't been proven. Then we got into looking into the genetically modified stuff and discovered that no one has ever been allowed to do any tests through the U.S. Department of Agriculture on genetically modified food and the long-term effects of it, but yet all of a sudden we have allergies coming out of our ears. We can't, you and I were raised on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
They've never allowed it on humans. They have in Russia and China. Same thing you see in rats. There have been rodent studies, guinea pigs, you name it, sterilization, deformities, just it's devastating. It's and again, not just genetically modified, it's the cross species traits. Oh, the stuff is deadly.
You want to know about I think maybe your folks don't really understand what this genetic modification thing is. Let's take soybeans. That's the most common problem. You know, that's the one that
it's the fillers.
Yeah, it's the one that's in everything, and that's where the genetic modification started with first. Monsanto created that genetic modification and stuff, and now you have a hard time finding a soybean right now that's not genetically modified. In fact, we order our soy flour from one of the only plants in the entire country that will not allow genetically modified stuff in their plant. They can't. They can't. And so the whole thing with soy, here's how genetic modification goes. You've got a soybean. They want to find a means by which they don't have to cultivate. In other words, run the shovels through and dig up the weeds and do all that working of the land. They want to be able to spray Roundup on the stuff and kill off the weeds, but they have to have the plant not get killed off too, because it's defoliate. So what you do is you take the gene pool from the soy, and this is going to be my explanation of it. This is not scientific. This is Steve Shank's simplified version so I can understand it. And then they take a bacteria, which is a critter, and they take some of the genetic licensing from that critter, and they put it together with the plant, and all of a sudden they have a plant that is half critter, half plant, not half and half, but enough of each.
And that's a cross species, but then it gets the trait they want, but then randomly has all these other traits. And you take the BT corn, it's got a fungus 1,000 times stronger than it should be, where it kills bugs that eat it, but it's okay for us to eat it, and we wonder why people are getting Alzheimer's at 30.
But you see, now let's look at allergies. You ever have anybody, I'm sure that your viewers out there know somebody that's had a liver transplant or one of the major transplants. What they have to do is knock down their immune system, something fierce, so that the body will accept that, because what the body is, the way it defends itself is it prevents anything foreign from coming in. It kills it off or gets rid of it, and it rejects it. Okay, now we've got a whole bunch of allergies going on, right? So what happens when the body eats something or consumes something like what you were talking about and like what I was talking about, that it says, oh, soy, cool, I'll eat that sucker. The Orientals have been living on soy for thousands of years. and all of a sudden it gets inside and it says, whoa, what's this? This is, it's not a plant, it's not an animal. Reject. That's
and now you've got Crohn's disease.
Allergic reaction.
Yes, exactly. You're having an allergic, and all the doctors admit GMO is what's causing it to explode. But this industry now, what they had 8 major food crops GMO, now they're coming out with over 100. Everything. And then their genetics infects the similar species, and there's almost no corn varieties that haven't been infected now.
I understand. Now, you go back to our original subject.
It's like a space alien takeover.
There you go.
I mean, aliens, if they came here, this would be their plan, to kill us, and kill us slowly, where they just incrementally kill us and we don't notice.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, how do you cook a frog? We won't go into that.
Back to the farming point. I've got to make this, and we're going to go through your other secrets.
Okay.
This article came out. The End of Humanity, Rise of the Robots, the Elite's Plan for Future doesn't include you, Alex Jones, Paul Watson. This has the quotes of the top futurists and top globalists saying, we've been farming you, now we've got robots, we're going to kill you. And we're going to shut your food off and shut your land off with Agenda 21, and then we're going to bankrupt you into government hands, and then we're going to release bioweapons and kill you.
Well, now that's a cheery little note.
No, I mean, I've got their quotes.
I understand.
This is what's insane about this. And they just talk about it like we're not listening.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go through your other secrets. I mean,
well, the bottom line is that we're the only company that I know of that makes sure that there's no genetically altered stuff in there. Most of the companies don't even care. And you see, you got to understand what we're dealing with. If you eliminate all this bad stuff that makes you glow in the dark and all that, and then you get flavor profiles that are as closely guarded right now. Our flavor profiles are as closely guarded as the recipe for Coca-Cola, because you can't get food that tastes this good.
Tastes incredibly good.
And the reason that's important is what people don't realize is with storable food, it used to be storable. Now, right now, with the economy the way it is, this stuff is half as expensive as what you're going out and buying at the grocery store.
Because you're buying factory direct.
Yeah, we've eliminated 4 steps in the chain of distribution. That's the only way that we can pay 3 times as much for the raw materials and still come out selling it for half the cost of what you're buying in the grocery store. Now, you tell me how you can beat that. Well, the fact is, what most people don't realize is that when you're dealing with quality of food, when you put the good stuff in there, the human body has a phenomenal means of recovering from anything, even the crap that we were being fed through all the factory farms and things. And so what we're having is we're having people contact us every day that are saying, you know, I've noticed that I got a lot more energy. I don't eat as much food. I feel better. We've got 2 or 3 families who have food restrictions that can only eat the food that we put out. And it's not because it's good, it's our food. It's just because what we've done is we've gone back to food that the body recognizes it hasn't had all of the additives, preservatives, and things go bumping in the night added to it. And the human body, if it's just given good food, will recover, and the people will gain their natural weight, come back to their natural weight. Their body will eventually just heal itself, and they will be able to eat food like usually. You know, we have people, there's a big thing about how many calories do you get or how many grams of protein. You know how the pioneers did it? They didn't even count calories, didn't count the protein. What they did was if they run up and down the hill every day for quite a while, they'd come home and they'd be hungry and they'd eat a lot. Somebody that was sitting at a desk job, come home, they weren't that hungry, they wouldn't eat that much. But we've got so many additives in the food, like the additional MSG and all of the stuff that makes food addictive so that people bypass their natural appetite.
It's addictive because it's a chemical. It's a drug.
Right.
Take MSG. The Japanese couldn't get their troops to eat horrible canned food, horse meat and stuff. They learned to put MSG in it, and it's literally a drug and makes you want to eat, and that became...
And the other thing that it does is it allows manufacturers not to have to spend 3 times as much on the raw materials as we do. It allows them to buy number 3 and number 4 grade vegetables and put in lower quality food. Food has not been ripened in the, on the vine, so it gets its nutrition, and therefore its flavor. They can put the cheap stuff in, and then that actually fools your taste buds into thinking that you're eating good food.
You were telling me about...
In fact, it's addictive.
Tell folks about spies that are trying to get into eFoods Direct. I mean, you were telling me that they literally follow you around, like your suppliers, everything. You were telling me the egg story.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. We try, obviously our recipes are very closely guarded. But we've got one organization that has hired some food, actually not processors, but some food chemists to analyze our recipes to try and duplicate what we're doing. We went up and contacted a supplier that had some really good quality items that we wanted to use for raw materials. 2 days later, a couple of folks followed us up there. They didn't even know about these guys, but they had found out that we had gone up and visited them. They went up and visited them, and they're trying to buy our raw materials. And it just, this type of stuff goes on. And where it comes from, these people are just trying to make a living and trying to do business. But where it comes from is that what we're trying to do, our basic objective, with 12 million American children, American kids, these aren't the ones that the movie stars are adopting because it looks good. These are American kids go to bed hungry every night. We've got millions of Americans out of work. We've got millions of Americans out of their homes. Half the population can't even afford their stinking food in America. Somebody has to feed Americans and give them back their freedom and give them a food that's not only good to eat right now, but is good enough quality to keep them healthy, that they can put in and store while they still have the stinking money to put it in, so that at some point in time, we still have enough people with enough liberty and freedom to take back this country. Because that's what has to happen. And that's why your people have to get some food. If they don't get it from the sources that you suggest, they're in danger of all this other junk that we're talking about. But the bottom line, get some stinking food so you are not dependent on the system that wants to make you dependent. Because the extent to which you're dependent is the extent to which you give power over yourself to that on which you depend. And the only thing we have control over is putting in our food, and we better doggone well do it while we can still afford it and while it's still available, and that's what happens.
And we talked about that in part 1, if people missed it, Global Food Crisis Special Report, where you explain that's why they're pushing the food stamps. That's why they want everybody dependent. That's why they're driving up the price. That's why they're shipping the food out of the country.
And what kind of food are they putting into the schools? I cracked the story that we were talking about with this pink slime stuff.
Oh yeah, talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're putting the pink slime. What pink slime is just the trimmings off from the parts of the critter that you normally wouldn't sell because of potential for E. coli contamination. If you get my drift.
Yeah, pig colons.
Yeah, the stuff that you don't eat. And so what they do is they treat it with ammonia, and then they have declared that it's legal for human consumption.
And then it's a kickback to the specialized companies that then sell all this crud. I mean, I remember going to public school and how horrible the food tasted. And now a lot of schools, Denver, Colorado, Chicago, Illinois, they won't let parents pack their food. I mean, it could be T-bone steak and a salad. They throw it in the trash. Parents can't be trusted. You're going to eat pink slime because it's a kickback to Rahm Emanuel's boys. What do you make of that?
Well, I make the fact that we're dealing with the regulations that require some of the foods, well, that allow some of the foods that are actually not fit for human consumption to be approved, like, for example, the addition of MSG. And in fact, if you want to look at something that's really nasty, you check out what hydrogenated oil does to the human body, and it makes MSG look like child's play. And so all I'm saying is that the reason that we put the quality of food in, the reason that we don't follow the same practices that are followed right now in the storable food industry, which is basically to put just about anything into the package, assuming, let me give you a perfect example. During 1999, Y2K, we shipped a lot of food. There was another company, it's really well known, it's heavy duty in Utah, that was shipping a lot of the basics out, you know, wheat and that type of thing. When the towers went down, you know, a year or so later, when the towers went down, we started getting calls from people who said, hey, we got to get some more food. And we got a call from some folks that had ordered some wheat from this company up in Idaho. The two gals were neighbors, and they'd opened up one of the buckets of wheat, and there were a whole bunch of grasshopper parts on top of it. Now, that's a little bit of extra protein, but it's pretty unsavory. But one of them took a cup of the wheat and put it into a magic mill. I don't know if you're familiar with this, a high-speed mill that grinds wheat into flour. And it instantly blew up the mill because it had little bitty rocks in it. Okay? So what we did was we took the message, and I called the manager of this other company, and I said, hey, Steve, we've got an interesting situation. Here's some of the folks that you sold during 1999 had, you know, some bad stuff in their wheat. They got about 6 buckets of it. I thought you might want to know about it and maybe replace it for them. He said, no, that's ridiculous. These people aren't going to be using that stored food anyway. They won't know the difference, and no, we don't want to do anything. So we replaced the buckets of wheat for these gals, but that's the attitude. The whole idea behind most of the food storage industry, there are a bunch of carpetbaggers that are coming in, putting any kind of crap into the pouches. Oh, by the way, 2 years ago, everything was in number 10 cans. Since we started putting out the pouches of food, pretty much everybody is doing the pouches and not so much number 10 cans anymore, but be that as it may, we are setting the standard for the industry, but I'm not sure the industry could even be called an industry. But the fact is that what's happening is that the reason it's so important to be aware of what you're buying, check it out and make sure that it doesn't have the stuff that makes you glow in the dark. Make sure that it's something that is really good to eat, because when you have to go on your food supply, children will not eat something that they don't like. I don't care how hungry they are.
And you also get the food fatigue if it's just one thing like beans and rice. But expanding on that, because I know you don't like to talk, you know, bad about your competition, I don't see anybody out there saying, call, get 6 free meals, what do you just pay for the shipping? You know, test it. I mean, you've always been saying, the 6, 7 years you've been a sponsor, or longer now, I guess, 8 years, time flies. You've always said, call, get some samples, test it, eat this, learn about it, use it, because you're proud of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And again, I remember when I first started trying to get storable food about 12, 13 years ago, it was like old MREs, or I'd open it up, or it was just like, it wasn't even real. So I guess they realized people know we need to have some food storage as real insurance. And so there's all these fly-by-night people, and they make all these incredible claims. You know, when you pointed out our food will last on average more than 10 years, your competition just says 100. But explain to people, you can't put a shelf life on things, can you? You have to estimate it. Tell folks.
Well, one of the things that I troubled over was, you know, all these claims that are coming. Some of the outfits are saying 50 years, 25 years, 30 years.
8 million.
Yeah. Well, we've got 25 years on our website. Just because we kept having people ask us, well, bottom line, you can call up any nutrition department at any university that you want to and ask them how long dehydrated food lasts. Well, it depends on the moisture content. It depends on whether any light can get into the package. It depends on whether how much oxygen is out of it. All of these things. And so you can't say it lasts a certain length of time. That's horsepucky. So usually what we do is we say, you know, up to 25 years or whatever. But that's a distraction.
Whatever you say, they just top it.
Oh, yeah.
So you should just say, well, generally this lasts more than 10 years, but it depends on what it is and things. And it's like, well, we have 500 years. I mean, I'm joking, but like 50 years, and we've been in the business 39 years, and just on and on and on.
Well, you see,
I also noticed, because I had a few other food sponsors before you, and I would try the food, wouldn't like it. They'd also do stuff like be a sponsor, not pay. Get behind. I mean, it's just like there's a lot of snakes out there.
Yeah.
efoodsdirect.com/Alex to find the discounts, the specials. We just appreciate your sponsorship. And I know that my family for Storable Food has eFoods Direct food. And I hope people will also call the number up there. Now explain that deal, because a lot of my listeners have gotten the 6 meals. How does that work?
It's very simple. It's 6 meals. It's 3 packages of food, and we figure that there are 2 meals in each package. And so we send those out along. Right now it's coming out of a nice little box that has a CD in it that tells you some of the things that you need to know about food, and it's got a planning pack in it. So
it's an information pack, and it's got food.
It's actually not intended to be a sample. It's intended to be a food planning program, so they can figure out how many meals it takes, or how many of our packages it takes to feed their family. But that thing, it's just an absolute outstanding piece of information for people. But all they do is they pay the shipping on it. It's $19.95.
And I know shipping. That's what it costs. Yeah. $9.95.
That's it. And we give it to them free. And people just contact us back. Now they need to contact through you, because we're shipping this out to them. Doesn't cost them anything but just the cost of shipping. And
sure, they can go to efoodsdirect.com/Alex or freefood.efoodsdirect.com. freefood.efoodsdirect.com.
And folks, you need to go through Alex and his site, just for the simple reason that we need to track this so that he gets credit for what
Sure,
we're
but
doing.
Steve, I'm just glad they're getting food.
No, that's the point.
Yeah.
The fact
sure, I mean, you sponsors help us get the word out as well.
We're both in the business, and the best thing that your listeners and your viewers can do is, the scriptures say, once ye have been warned, warn your neighbor. And the best thing that they can do for your business, and for what you're trying to do, for the message you're trying to get out, and for what we're trying to do, is feed as many Americans as we possibly can, feed and prosper as many families. The best thing they can do for both of us is tell their neighbors and their friends and their relatives and anybody that can afford food. And also, they might, if they have a few extra bucks, help some other people to afford it.
Well, I know this. Going factory direct from a great, trusted supplier like yourself, who actually produces it all yourself now, I mean, that's the way to go, so people don't have to go through trial and error like I did. But the least they can do is $9.95. That just pays for the shipping. Get it, read over it, try it out for yourself. That's what we've done. I even told my wife a few months ago, I said, go ahead and get from a few other suppliers. And some of it was okay, but nothing compared to the quality from the J. Michael Stevens Group, efoodsdirect.com. There was one other question I wanted to ask you, and now I can't remember it here. It's just there's so many things to go over, so many things to talk about. Oh, this is it. What percentage of American people are actually getting in storable food? Because as things begin to collapse, as I see people starting to really wake up to what's happening, and as I kind of get scared, oh my gosh, we've been right about all this. It's like, it's kind of bittersweet. See, we told you so, but man.
Yeah, it's one of those things you hate to be right.
Yeah, exactly. You hate to be right. But what's going to happen when people finally figure it out and rush out and try to get food?
It's going to be difficult. When we had Japan go down, okay, we had an instant huge spike in orders. And you got to understand, if we're projecting a year out ahead with our raw materials, right now, just to give you an idea, we are stocking up as fast as we can. We're buying raw materials ahead because of what we just saw in the Democratic and the Republican conventions. We're looking at that and seeing where this is going, and we're stocking up, and we suggest that people do that. But right now, Alex, this is September. We are drawing on our purchase orders from November right now. That's how things are moving. If we have a huge spike, somebody gets really nervous, or when the September U.S. Department of Agriculture figures come out on this crop, we won't see the increase in prices until October. We're buying as fast and as hard as we can right now before those hit. And everyone that's out there that is concerned about getting food in, either for availability, because there are going to be shortages, or from the standpoint of price, if you can still afford it right now, I would suggest that you do the same thing that we're doing, is get it in, because at the point where there's no food available, we're going to have a situation where no matter how much money you got, you won't be able to get the food.
Expanding on that, so many of the companies now, just in regular food, fast food, whatever, they admit more and more fillers. The food is getting worse and worse as they try to keep the illusion of that going on. And I just think about how they've tried to totally domesticate us. We showed some statistics up there where 55% of Americans, I saw this poll a few weeks ago, think the government will take care of them during a disaster. They never do. 9/11, they say the dust is good for you, not bad for you. Katrina, every time.
You know what they did in Japan? You know what they, with the high radioactivity level, they were telling the people that a 10%, a 10 times
safe level was okay, rads.
A 10 times safe level was okay.
No, it's worse than that. The Environmental Protection Agency, it turns out within 3 months, tuna were getting caught off San Diego with 20-something times. Okay. Then, people can look this up, we covered it at the time, the Environmental Protection Agency raised, the Environmental Protection Agency raised
the acceptable level.
Yeah. With all these isotopes, 125%, 100, some they raised thousands of times saying it was safe.
Yeah.
When my wife was in Europe, when Chernobyl happened, she was a kid, and her dad was a diplomat, in Italy, and I went and looked up the news, this was the case, all over Europe, they didn't let people have any of the cabbage or lettuce, things grown, because the radiation's coming down. No milk, it was all powdered milk from the U.S. or other places for 6 months, because they knew that was bioaccumulating. In Japan and here, they just say, hey, everything's fine. Yeah. I mean, it is, and it turned out they faked how dangerous it was. But again, we're supposed to just trust the government.
Well, you go back to the government supplying things. I can't remember, was it Edward? I think it was Edward way back before Katrina. They had some of the folks from the agencies, the government agencies, contact a huge Army-Navy store out in California and buy 72,000 MREs to take out there. Now, I interviewed, during Katrina, the Katrina thing, I interviewed a man and his 2 sons who...
just to know, that was back when you did a radio show.
Yeah. I interviewed a man and his 2 sons who had been caught in the barricades between the shore and the railroad track. You remember when they put the concertina wire along?
Yeah, they wouldn't let people leave.
Yeah.
This is the government. You can't leave the city. Yep. The highways were open. They would shoot people that tried to leave. Right. You're going to go to a Superdome where we're going to rape you, and if you're rich and live in a high and dry area, we're going to come take your guns. This government is a pack of murdering criminals.
Well, so anyway, what had happened is that they hired the teenagers to get on trucks from the organization that came down there to take care of the children. And they went in and they broke into schools, in their cafeterias, and took the food out of their, their freezers and everything like that, took that and cooked it, and that's what they fed the people with. The trucks didn't come down there loaded. They came down there and basically pilfered the schools to feed the people that were caught in that no man's land.
Well, think about it. The government wouldn't let them leave, and then went and found the rich areas and robbed them and ransacked and took their guns and raped women. That all came out now. And I was being told this at the time by listeners that were there, and I couldn't even believe them. And then it all came out. I mean, who do they have working for this government? It's just a bunch of scum.
Alex, if 10 years ago people would have heard the conversation that we had the other day and this conversation that we're having right now, they would have thought that we were half a bubble off with one oar underwater, a brick shy of a load, a taco short, a blue plate special, and the elevator didn't go to the top and the lights were on. They'd have thought we were not. They would run you off the air and they would have put me out of business if they'd have heard that we were insane enough to have the conversation that you and I just had.
And now we're not radical enough, some say. You're right. I'm getting on all these AM and FM stations everywhere, and mainstream news is even quoting me now, and it makes me realize, wow, I was right, and it's worse than I thought, and and it's not good. I'm not happy. I mean, how bad is this going to get?
I've got a fellow that takes about 4 different of these news, newsletters, okay? And he feeds me articles and information. That's how I kind of keep up on what's going on. And it's to the point where I can't stand to read some of these things, because I go home at night and I talk to Sylvia and I'm saying, I don't know. It's coming from every direction, and I can't do it. I don't know what to do about it.
It's not just the corrupt government. It's a breakdown of morals. People have gotten lazy. I mean, I'm a hardworking guy, but compared to my dad, I'm nothing. Compared to his dad,
Yeah.
I mean, people used to not put up with crap either. So that allows government and corruption to take over. That everybody's so compliant. They let the TSA stick their hands down their pants, and people don't have any pride anymore. And so it just allows the worst to rise to the top, which is what happened in every other civilization. Yeah. We're going the way of Rome, Steve.
Oh, that's absolutely true. Well, you know, the old saying that people get the government that they deserve, when people are no longer willing to fight for their liberty, they will lose their liberty. When people are no longer willing to be independent, come hell or high water. You see, my daddy was 62 when I was born. He was born in 1887.
Wow.
Okay? So I was raised by virtually an old pioneer almost. And those people wouldn't take a loan if you beat them with a stick. They wouldn't take freebies for anything. They were so fiercely independent. They were fiercely self-reliant.
The opposite of domesticated.
That's right. And you see, what happens when you dumb a population down, when you make them weak by making things too easy for them. You know, my daddy was 94 years old, and I was already involved with food supplies and things like that. And we were talking about some of the things that were happening back then, and this was a lot of years ago. And he said, son, the problem with this country is that we've had it too good for too long. You see, in Anoka County in Minnesota, he's the only farmer that went through the Great Depression and kept his farm. He was the only guy. And he used to, when his note came due, he had his herd mortgaged. When his note came due, he'd put on his black suit and lay down on the couch for about a half an hour and just collect himself, and then go into and talk to the banker one more time, and he kept his farm. During the Depression, he sold a whole carload of hogs down to South St. Paul, where Swift & Company was a packing company. He got his commission check from the commission man, and he owed 50 cents for the transportation. He still had 32 hogs left. And so he started to make, Jimmy Dean has whole hog sausage. I think my old man was probably the first guy to have whole hog sausage. He butchered those 32 hogs and made sausage. He had dairy cattle. He made butter from the milk from the Jersey cows. And he had chickens and he had eggs. And 2 times a week he'd go to Elk River, Minnesota, and Anoka. One was 8 miles, one was 4 miles, and he'd run a sausage, butter, and egg route, And that's how he got through the Depression. The day that he butchered the first hog, he had a hired man working for him, and the hired man walked off the farm, never to come back again, because that was too much work for two men. He did the job himself. You see, that's the kind of people that made this country great.
And now look what we've turned into.
But no. There are still some of them left.
You're right. And they're the enemy. I mean, the New World Order does not like them very much. But expanding on that very eloquent story you tell, imagine 90%, and this is where we should end it, because it's, and I want your take on this, Steve. 90% of statistical, or some say 89, were agrarian or living in the country during the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right at 90% live in the city, and of the 10% that live in the country, only half of them are self-sufficient. So we've gone from 90% somewhat self-sufficient to 10% somewhat self-sufficient.
But let me tell you what we can do with that. Let me tell you what we can do with that. If you take this food that has everything in it that we've put into it, you see, most people that are aware of what we're talking about, most people that are looking at us right now, you know, would love to get out of the city, would love to go out and have their little place. They don't have time. They don't have the money. We don't have the economy. But here's what they can do. Take a portion of their income. And they don't have to spend the extra 6 or 7 hours a day after they get done with work coming and hoeing in the garden, then figuring out how to can it or to dry it or do whatever. All they do is take a small portion of their income and they stack up a bunch of these cases like you've got in your garage. You literally have your farm in your garage. The only thing is you don't have to go and plow and dig and hoe and grow those vegetables and figure out how to store them. You've got it there, and it's cheaper than the food you buy in the stinking grocery store. Now you tell me how many of these people living in a stinking apartment can have a 1-year supply or have their own stinking farm there that the product is already harvested and stored from. You tell me.
Steve, I can tell, Steve Shank, eFoods Direct, I can tell why you're the leader in this, because you really care, and it's passion, and it shines through. But it's clear, they're imploding things, they're deindustrializing, they're shutting down the farms, the small family ranches. They're doing everything they can to break us and domesticate us. That's what the TSA is about, all of it. But you're right, because of you and others out there exposing this, I think we have a chance. But I just can't. Lastly, what do you think it'll look like historically, studying this, probably like nobody else has done, if we have a Great Depression now? We're already in the beginning throes of one. What will it be like when there's 50 million people in electronic bread lines and the money doesn't work anymore, or it doesn't buy what they need anymore, or there isn't food there? The cities will burn. And then the feds will just sit back and love it, and then just come in and then go to the rich areas and take everybody's guns like they did in Katrina. Or if you're trying to get out of the city with your family, they'll sit there and machine gun you. I mean, it's just, what do you do when you've got giant hordes of domesticated idiots on one side who love, you know, American Idol and have no idea which end is up, can't find their butt with both hands, and then a psycho, crazy eugenics government? What do you do?
Well, Alex, you just asked me to solve the problem of the entire human race throughout all generations of time and the history of mankind.
No, you're right. So I guess the answer is get back to...
How much time do I have to do it?
You got 5 minutes.
No, I'll tell you what. I don't need 5 minutes. If it is to be, it's up to me. And you see, all of the governments, all of the plans, and all the history of mankind comes down to one thing. The divinity of the soul of man. You have within your being the greatness and the magnificence to be who you can become. And if every American chooses to be independent, chooses to take care of themselves, chooses to do the right thing with regard to themselves and their families, you know, very simply, they can do everything they can. But my daddy used to say an interesting thing. The mind that changed against its will is of the same opinion still. No one can make you or me do anything. They can lock us up in prison, but they can't affect our minds. And if every soul that hears the message that you're teaching, if every being chooses to be the best that they can be and take back their liberty by taking responsibility for who they are and what their family does, and never give that responsibility away, then the world will take care of itself.
Wow, well said. So humanity needs to stand up, and we also need to set our will against these tyrants and make that decision, and then everything else flows from that. Thank you so much, Steve Shank.
Appreciate you.
Wow, wow. See that passion? I've heard him on the radio for many years. Because years ago, you had a radio show. You used to listen to it here locally. It was syndicated. And, you know, known you for 7, 8 years. And then I got the big speech in there the other day. And I'm like, hey, we have got to get him in here. So we stayed an extra day. We didn't even have this planned yesterday. It just happened. And there you go. You got some of the fire I saw. I mean, wow. Steve Shank, efoodsdirect.com/Alex for the discounts and the 6 free meals if you want to pay for the shipping and test it out. Whatever you do, folks, get ready. They want to destroy you. They're going to shut the economy off. We've been seized by terrorists. Steve Shank, thank you very much.
Appreciate you, bud.